Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is Transparity's AI Readiness webinar, really focusing in on creating AI foundations to unleash innovation. We'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So please feel free to use the chat, include any questions that you have, and we'll include time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. Also, keep an eye out for some polls. So polls will be popping up. Feel free to share your responses as we'd love to see them. Just make this interactive for everybody. So yeah, we're really thrilled about this one. We recently launched a white paper to support organizations in bringing the promise of AI to life. So really what you see here is the dream team, maybe the A team, maybe the Avengers. In any case, it's all of the incredible authors of the white paper into the webinar in a panel discussing key topics about building AI foundations. I'm Hillary. I'm one of our industry leads at Transparity, and I'll be serving as the host. But really, we're here to be joined by our practice leads, all of whom you can see on the page here, and they bring important points of view on AI projects as they bring them to life with our customers and clients every day. And we're really delighted to be joined by Simon Wilmore. He's BMT's Digital Transformation Director. BMT is a maritime-oriented high-end design house and technical consulting firm we've supported as part of their digital transformation, and he'll help bring that journey to life. So just a little bit about us at Transparity. We're a Microsoft-focused consultancy that helps organizations get the most out of their tech investments, whether it's through Copilot, data strategy, or broader digital transformation. You'll see all of this come to life through our panel. We really work closely with our clients to understand your goals and build tailored programs that deliver real impact for you. So why are we here? I think we kind of all know about the AI buzz, and really the AI buzz is turning into adoption. So looking at that first stat, this is more and more businesses are seeing true opportunity in AI, and as a key part of your organizational success and taking measures to ensure that you as organizations are equipped to leverage it. So we'll just walk through some common use cases that we're seeing. Let us know maybe in the chat if any of the use cases that we'll show in a second are ones that you're looking to leverage, maybe leveraging already. So we can show what's possible for you and your industry. So if we go to the next slide, to bring this to life, wanted just to highlight the fact that, BMT, what Simon will be talking about in a little bit, we worked with Simon and BMT on an intelligent conversational agent, which was then equipped with a metadata feature and developed a knowledge mining search for navigating secure, globally distributed document repository. So all of this kind of starts as use cases, starts as concepts, and then we work with you to really bring these to life for you as organizations. So that's a little bit of scene setting, but I'd like to kind of start and bring our panel into the conversation. So calling in those AI Avengers, what should a comprehensive AI strategy look like? And maybe our Avenger Ramya could unmute and then she'll tell us more.
Typical has to be done.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hillary. We often start off talking about strategy. We see a lot of fragmented efforts leading to duplication and wasted resources, right? So AI should be a strategic enabler, not a standalone effort. AI delivers the greatest impact when it's guided by clear, long-term, broader strategic priorities that aligns with the organization. With the strategic goals clarified comes the understanding of the functional and organizational level pain points. Typically, we use a prioritization matrix to evaluate effort versus business value that helps us identify low-hanging fruits, quick to deliver, to high-value, transformative, big, long-running projects. And then we talk about readiness assessment, understanding where the organization currently stands in terms of AI maturity, helps us decide what are the key drivers, be it data, infrastructure, typically even the skill set, and lastly, the governance. Developing a roadmap, choosing the right technology path, let's say build versus buy, individual effectiveness, are we talking about extending the existing capability, or building AI from scratch that gives you a greater flexibility and customization. We begin with a focused proof of value with a narrow scope that delivers quick, tangible results. What this helps us do is get the stakeholders buy-in, confidence in the tech, demonstrate a quick ROI that helps us lay the foundation for long-term AI adoption. You may then decide to go multiple phases of work before going into live or deployment phase. The journey doesn't end there, sadly. It is a continuous improvement and emphasis on maintaining the solution, whether it's retaining the model, fine-tuning the data, indexing the volume of data that's coming in, tuning performance, constantly adjusting to changing compliance and fairness checks. AI performance is only as strong as data it learns from. So passing over to my colleague Luke, our data expert, to talk through the data strategy.
Thanks, Ramya. So as Ramya was just saying, obviously data is fundamental to any successful AI implementation. So a strategy, whether it's AI or data-led, needs to factor in your sort of strategic approach to data. As I said, we typically see two entry points. Now, rather than it always being data-led, there's also now a sort of AI-led strategy component to it as well. But regardless of where you are in your data and AI strategy, whether you're starting to explore it, already exploring it, or not even on that journey yet, you should obviously consider the sort of core 5 pillars when it comes to all things data. Unsurprisingly, a data strategy starts with data. So all things data. What data sources are key to not only the AI solutions you're looking at potentially implementing, but also the business as well. What are those key data sources out there? And you can guarantee that successfully delivering an AI project will accelerate your organization's demand for more and doing more with their data once it's been centralized. So yeah, understanding where you're starting from, where does your data live, how secure is it, what state, what quality is it in, is essential as you start that sort of AI and data strategy journey. Next, we move on to technology. So this is very much sort of focused on the data aspect. Obviously, there's a myriad of technology to go and deliver the AI solutions, but what modern data platform it best suits you? What's going to put you in the best position to go and then surface that data back into AI applications and solutions? So is it Fabric? Is Microsoft Fabric a play, or do you have some really bespoke sort of AI requirements which aligns more with Databricks and the flexibility of the compute power that has? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself before you start performing any technical implementation. Too often we see customers going down a technical route and buying into a platform that then doesn't necessarily mean that it then suits all of their needs. And this doesn't need to be a one platform to rule them all approach either. Both Fabric and Databricks complement each other, so it could even be that you take sort of a hybrid approach to it. I think the next pillar, people, is a core one to get right from the very beginning. So one of the most important pillars. Too often we see that both sort of AI and data work streams are very single focused on serving either a specific function, say HR or marketing, or a very specific fixing a challenge that the business has got today. And obviously AI can be a contentious subject, so having the right stakeholders at the right levels on board and aligned with your wider AI and data strategies is essential. Without that buy-in, the strategies and then the actual future technical implementation just won't go anywhere. They're also key to helping shape all of the other core pillars as well. Without that knowledge of the data sources and the use cases and what are the sort of AI use cases out there, again, the strategy can only be so successful. Moving on to use cases. So this pillar really helps build out a roadmap for your strategy. So it's a real fine balancing act between developing an all singing, all dancing strategy, but that never technically delivers. So it's about developing a strategy that's got a roadmap alongside it, so you can start to execute against it, to start to demonstrate back to the business the value of investing in AI and data platforms. And this obviously then starts to identify not only AI use cases, but also some reporting and analytic use cases that you might have that you can then leverage your data for as well. The final pillar is AI readiness. So are you ready for the AI era? So as I said, you could be coming at this from an AI sort of led approach, but if you're coming at it from a data led approach, is your data now ready for the AI era? So like I said before, we see two approaches, that data and AI led one, and that importance of striking the right balance between formulating strategy, but also executing technically to satisfy the business with their demand for both AI and data. So regardless of your entry into the strategy, whether it's data or AI led, a thing that we often find overlooked massively is the sort of the governance and security of data. Sort of unleashing AI on your data can be a scary thing for a lot of customers. So over to you, really, and how would you sort of advise businesses start to address that sort of data security and governance at a strategy level?
Yeah, thanks. So I'd say, preface it with saying the suggestion of kind of building governance into your strategy really helps keep that strategic alignment with the organization. And when we look at AI and data, it's kind of a complex technical subject, which can be misunderstood by organizations. So you'd always take the time to work on that translation. So if we're thinking about whether it's like a governance committee, it's that feedback channel that kind of Ramya spoke about earlier. And also, if you're thinking from a data point of view, it's also looking at translating what is structured data in a specific environment and building it into something that's a bit more understood by the organization, by a domain or a business product, which can then be looked across kind of your entire environment. So that's really, I think those two pillars are really important from a governance point of view, is getting that feedback channel and the understanding between the organization and the strategy and the technical, but also getting under the hood of where your data is being used, where it's stored, and also then how it's accessed. So we talk about securely accessing that data. Once you understand everything else, then it's really how is that being accessed. So on that theme, Ant, I believe you're probably best placed to get started in terms of how do we access this safely?
To answer that question and also give my own thoughts around the strategy, I think from my perspective, and when I say my perspective, I'm talking infrastructure here and Azure and that side of things. When you're thinking about an AI project, especially one which is custom, the function or the output of that application or workload, and the data that you feed it and the governance, of course, is important. It's the first thing people think about because it's a really interesting and valuable part, of any AI project. It's what the end users get to see, feel, and derive value from. However, what is often missed in an AI strategy is making sure that you think about the foundations, and that the foundations in place. And when I talk about foundations, I'm talking technical foundations that allow an AI application to function, be secure, be scalable, for example. I have an analogy around this, which is if you're lucky enough to design and build your own home, you no doubt will look forward to designing the exterior, the kitchen, the bathrooms, for example. But none of those are possible without foundations, the water, the gas, the electric. And this is still true, not just really for AI projects, but for all projects. You have to think about the things that the users won't see or feel. And again, that's technical services that I'm really talking about here, things like networking, access, storage and monitoring and so on. They're important to think about because outside of the AI data and governance side of things, it makes those much easier to scale, secure and manage going forward. We, not just for AI projects, often see people don't think about these foundations, and you can block yourself into a corner, or you can make it a lot harder in the future to scale. So this perfectly actually leads into our next topic, which is what's the first step to executing your strategy. And for me, from my perspective, I've spoken a lot about foundations, but what does this really look like? What does this mean? And again, this isn't specific to AI applications, but it's just as important. And when I talk about foundations, Microsoft refers to this as a landing zone. Some of you would have heard me speak about this before or seen this term online. And landing zones come in two flavors, really, foundational or an application landing zone. A foundational landing zone ensures your Azure environment is ready for workloads now and, more importantly, in the future. Much like the foundations in your home, whereas an application landing zone is specific to that application, and we will actually cover that shortly. But as you can see on the screen, these are design areas or considerations you should be thinking about when thinking about those foundations. And I'm, again, talking technical services here, but identity and access management, who has access to what? And that's not just scoped to people, what systems have access to what's data. This is obviously increasingly important, especially in a world of AI and data. Networking is important. Where are you pulling that data from? It could be a third party, it could be on premises, for example. Do you have the structure in place to allow that to happen quickly and manage that securely, for example? Security should be on a slide on every webinar, of course, secure by design, but are you using features to secure every part of this application? Are you using firewalls for the networking? Maybe Defender for the data side, or Sentinel to monitor your attack surface? Data, when it comes to attacks, is what everyone wants, really. So again, it's really easy to think about what's this application going to do and how the user's going to use it, but security, cost is important. I probably can't really stress that enough, but especially when you're creating custom AI applications, costs can spiral. Do you have budgets set in Azure? Do you have alerting set up? Do you have reports set up, for example? That's just as important as the application itself. Operational excellence, and when I speak about operational excellence, I mean, are they being monitored? Is the data being monitored? Are we alerting on issues? Is data backed up? Does it have redundancy? Again, can you recover from an issue or from an attack quickly? That should be thought about in your strategy. Something we see increasing every day, and it's a good thing, but another thing people often forget about is, how is this being deployed? Is this in a DevOps manner? Are you using code to deploy the infrastructure as well as the application? Maybe it's GitHub and GitHub Actions, but that needs to be thought about too, because there comes into play things like skill set, different levels of access, even operating models can fall into that kind of bucket and design consideration. And for the last two, future-proofing, again, a properly designed landing zone will allow you to deploy an AI application next week, another application in 3 years, and another one in 10 years, easily and repeatable, without getting unstuck and having to go back and change things. And we see that often. It also enables scalability, for example. And finally, governance. Is the environment governed? Do you have regulatory commitments, ISO 27001, GDPR? Would you tell me today where you line up against those commitments? Do you have visibility? That's something that you can set up early on in your foundations, keep that visibility as you grow and build out these applications. So I spoke a lot about foundations and landing zones and why they're important, but don't just take my word for it. And Microsoft now include this as a non-negotiable for all data and AI projects in Azure in order to get funding. So they also clearly see the value here. But that's me from a foundational point of view. Ramya, do you have anything you want to add around kind of AI application, landing zone specific? Anything you want to add there?
Sure. Those are very important messaging from you, and thank you. An AI landing zone is important because it provides a structured, secured, also scalable foundation for deploying and managing any AI solutions across the board. Think of it as ready-to-use runway for AI projects to take off safely, but also includes infrastructure governance and security controls from get-go. Simon, your first step would have happened long before we came into the conversations of landing zones. So how did you get your business on board and build out that strategy?
Yeah, so we sort of realized, well, I recognized there were sort of three things that were going to happen the moment we got something in place, whatever that something was going to be. And there was going to be a whole load of people worried about different aspects of how we were going to use AI, maybe environmental impacts, cost impacts, data protection impacts. And so one of the really key things which kind of plays through what you've already said is worrying about the risk, worrying about what you don't want to do and what you don't want to happen at the end. So that was kind of actually a really key first bit of the strategy. The second bit then was actually then, well, okay, great. For the people who aren't worried about it and they're excited about it, what's going to be the use cases? How are we going to get innovative people engaged early on to deliver some business value, whilst also from the business perspective going, well, how are we going to control the costs? How are we going to we might get something good out of this, but actually if it costs too much to do it, is the ROI there? Is it worth doing? And so very early on, our strategy was always pitted around sort of those three points. And once we got going, it was always about revisiting, did we get the risks right? Did we something else to worry about? How do we get more value out? And how do we sort of manage those, manage that ROI equation? And that doesn't mean necessarily cost cutting. It might just mean actually spending more because the value is better than we thought it was going to be as well, which has also been a case in a few points.
Thanks so much for that, Simon. And yeah, I think in terms of the kind of acceleration of the AI projects, the next question we were thinking about is that, if data is the fuel, then AI is clearly the engine. And then being a little bit provocative, we're wondering, is that really a perfect marriage or a work in progress? Ramya, what's your take?
Absolutely. Engine needs the right fuel, right? So AI systems thrive on high quality, well-structured, resonating and representative data. Poor data quality is only going to magnify and lead to inefficiencies, bias, leakage, breakdowns, just like any bad fuel would do to a high performance engine. Luke, now to detail the modern data platform for fueling AI.
Yeah, thanks, Rami. I think that not to sit on the fence on that sort of question that Hilary posed, it's still very much a work in progress for a lot of organizations that we talk to. Data in various ranges of quality and sources, and also understanding of where that data is as well. Going back to that strategy piece, do you really understand your data footprint today? So the demand to adopt AI or simply do AI is present in every organization. So there's a massive drive to provide AI solutions with data, but to successfully do AI, you need to, as Rami was saying, fuel it with centralized, secure and quality data. Good data is really the cornerstone for good AI. Even though we're breaking new ground, what seems like every day with AI, the old IT adage of sort of garbage in, garbage out is truer than ever. An AI solution is only ever going to be as good as the data that it sits upon, and that's really where modern data platforms come into play and play a real sort of pivotal role in providing the tooling and the technology and the platform to both centralize your data, put quality controls in place around it, but also ensure that it's secured and governed, going back to a lot of Ian's points there in terms of that security and governance is often overlooked, but actually building it in at that foundational core level is really, really important. And tools like Microsoft Fabric have basically been designed for the AI era, really giving you a multitude of tools in order to be able to go and facilitate that data movement piece. So going to ingest data from disparate data sources into a central location, put some quality and cleansing controls around it, and then actually presenting that back to both AI solutions, but also end users as well in terms of sort of the analytical workloads that they might have. So again, Fabric's got that sort of multitude of experiences that allows you to centralize and secure that data ready for those AI workloads. And again, I'm sure we've all seen the horror stories in the press and have heard them from our counterparts that have sort of unleashing AI on your data and it potentially surfacing something that you didn't want it to necessarily surface to the wrong people. So having a platform that has got those controls embedded in them, something like Fabric or Databricks, is really essential to make sure you've got that proper technical sort of underpinning for your data that then can obviously feed on to your AI solutions as well. And you've been speaking a lot about the sort of the foundational aspects from a conceptual point of view. Are there any sort of specific tools that organizations should be looking at to make sure they've got those right controls in place?
Yeah, from a not just third party, but from a Microsoft point of view, and it goes back to my earlier point around operational excellence, right? Is the data being monitored, and who's accessing that data? There's Azure Monitor, which is native. There is Defender. From an access point of view, you can use things like RBAC, ideally things like PIM, which allows least privileged access, only giving access to people or systems what they need to have access to. Access to where the data is controlled in the back end, which you touched on there, Luke. Where does it live as well? Control over that. I mean, Ian touched on it slightly with governance, but using things like Azure Policy to block data moving out of a certain region, out of a certain storage account, for example, is super important. And again, it blocks it. You can rest easy at night knowing that someone hasn't done anything accidental. Accidents happen. From a protect and recover point of view, Azure Backup, again, native tooling to ensure that it's backed up and there's redundancy there. You've got things like Defender for Cloud and Sentinel from a security point of view. So yeah, it really goes back to that operational excellence point I made earlier on, which is keep eyes on everything, secure everything, and put guardrails in place that keeps everything best practice and as a default blocks anyone with any access being able to do things that you don't want them to do. But again, there's a big overlap there between the infrastructure, the technical services, and of course governance, because the governance of the data matters too. So Ian, if you don't mind, I'll pass over to you in terms of your perspective on that, if you can shed any light on the governance and some possible tooling there.
Yeah, perfect. So when we start thinking of kind of governance with AI workloads, especially within the Microsoft environment, Microsoft Purview is your go-to. So people might have kind of heard about Purview. I mean, essentially, it's a suite of tools, which some you may be more familiar with. So from the things like DLP, but then some are going to be more applicable here to there might be a bit more of a mystery, such as the data governance. Obviously, I haven't got enough time to go into all of them, but just to give a bit of a highlight of what they do. So I always divide Purview into two camps, if you like. So you have the information security side, or the M365 side, where we're thinking about information protection labels or data loss prevention. And then we can also start looking at the data side, which is the Purview Enterprise, which is where we're starting to think about data governance and some of those things that have already been touched on, such as health controls and things like lineage. So going back to what I talked about in the strategy, so understanding that flow of data, where it's come from, where it's being used, but removing it from being just a kind of a technical construct into making it a bit more business accessible, so you can feed that information out. So that then helps you as an organization understand the oversight and kind of governance. And to go back to the strategy again, is get that feedback and that constant monitoring and evolution of the data itself. So yeah, I think it's kind of quite a newish side to Microsoft Purview. So it has been around for a while, but it's really been picking up kind of speed. Obviously, as more people are adopting, it's become kind of more and more important to look at. So that Purview Enterprise side, that's going to help you looking at things like Fabric, it's going to even to blob storage, things like that. So it gives you one pane of glass to look across kind of multiple different technologies. Double check that data quality that we just talked about, making sure that it's formatted correctly, it's all filled in as you need. That's going to generate the correct responses kind of out of your AI. Now, this can all seem quite a lot of work, and it can be, but we know that can kind of almost put people off doing that. So one of the questions I always kind of like to think about is really how can we build governance at a pace to kind of keep pace with an AI deployment? Because we want to be part of the conversation, but we don't want to be a blocker. So when we're thinking about that, to get started, and like a starter for 10, if you like, you can take some of the Purview data classifications, and this is even in the unstructured data, so your kind of M365 environment, understand the type of information you're looking for with things like data classification, so sensitive info type, so looking customer numbers, personal identifiable information, things like that. Lay some foundations there. And you don't have to do this at like a tenant-wide level. That's when it really becomes kind of problematic to get this work done to feed into everything else. So if you take the specific use case that you're looking at, understand the foundational items of the data that you're looking to discover or kind of trace, then you can apply that, take it across into your data governance side, so your Purview enterprise, look in your Fabric environments and your blob storage, etc., discover those, and then that classification really becomes the foundation for you to understand policy and everything else that kind of you're going to need going forward. But you get to do it at a rapid pace without kind of getting in the way of your actual main driver, which is your AI deployment. So that's really how I'd suggest to kind of get started from a technical point of view with Purview. But I know, and from a Azure point of view, how would you kind of jumpstart it?
You touched on a point there that you don't want it to become a blocker, and going back to my previous point around the landing zone, doing something. The landing zone is something that happens before the AI application starts to be built. And from a governance point of view, this is going to sound super geeky, but one of the best services and underused services in Azure across the board is Azure Policy, which is a free service. And before you've even built AI applications, you could have that policy set to block specific things that you wanted to block. But more importantly and more valuable is to automate. So that system, if you tell it to, will automatically secure data, backup data, provide costing reports, ensure that logging's going to the right place, and you can set rules there. So set and forget, and then at least then when you move into working with AI, or actually absolutely any workload in Azure, you're not thinking about those things. You're not seeing those things as blockers. Set your business rules, your best practices, set them once, and then use that not just to block things you don't want to happen, but to also automate things that you do want to happen. So you're not constantly thinking about, right, new data's landed in there, where are we backing this up, how are we securing this? Actually, you've set that once. So for me, Azure Policy in this instance is the right way to go. And then anyone that's actually using Azure and isn't using Azure Policy right now, you would see it super valuable. And again, it's free, so why not? Ramya, I don't know if you have kind of a view on this question around governance and security, keeping up pace with AI deployments.
Sure. Thanks, Ant. AI governance framework itself outlines how we manage AI responsibly, not just for a particular deployment or particular pace, but for the entire life cycle. Now, that takes from strategy to deployment and beyond. Strategy to align with the business, as we already spoke about and established. Then we're talking about policies and standards that quite detail how AI is developed maintained, and more importantly, gives us a clear ownership of who owns the data and what is their responsibility. Governance that spans the entire life cycle and also proactively assessing risks that again, highlighting data biases, drifting, any misuse, leakages, etc. Finally, we've leveraged platforms that supports version control, GitHub, repos, and governance checks. This enables not only repeatable, scalable solutions, but also a secure AI operations across the entire organization. That also brings us to a common misconception. I am guilty of doing it as well. I used to use the term, and a lot of people do as well, responsible AI and trustworthy AI interchangeably, but there are quite a distinctive features and distinctions between those two terms. Ian, would you like to detail a little bit on what is trustworthy AI?
Yeah, certainly. So trustworthy AI, and I'll put my hands up, I was also confusing the two when I've previously spoken about them. Trustworthy AI, essentially, I always think is the kind of the desired characteristics of the implemented technical system. So if we think about the system, the AI system itself, so robustness and transparency. So, the system should perform as expected, but when expected, it should be kind of resilient and provide kind of strong process. This might essentially end up being could be a mission critical or organization critical process in the future. So you want to ensure that it's kind of highly resilient, trusted to be really effective. Now, also, we want it to focus on the reliabilities, as we just talked about, from the robustness. But if it's always there, and also the process is understood, then we know that the outcomes are predictable, explainable, and that is also feeds into the fairness. So if we know that the system is available and it's putting out fair results, then that helps build into our user trust. So people trust the AI and understand that its performance is correct, and gives them the kind of confidence to use it and not to be kind of quite so questioning when they don't really need to be. And if it's giving correct responses, we also want to make sure that any kind of compliance obligations are also being met by that. So then we know from a user point of view it's trusted, and also from an organizational point of view that is trusted. And then all of those, obviously, part of that trust feeds into the security. So, have we got technical measures in place to protect the AI system itself? So that's why I kind of see trustworthy AI and the kind of steps around it. So Ramya, from the responsible AI side, how do you see it?
Thanks, Ian. Responsible AI embeds ethical consideration. I know it's a big topic out there, but into designing and deploying of AI systems, it emphasizes on accountability, ensuring clear lines of responsibility for AI decision-making, and considering the broader impact of AI. Responsible AI is about governance, inclusivity, and also aligning with human values. In short, to summarize, trustworthy AI ensures the reliance on reliability on the systems, and responsible AI ensures that we stand behind it ethically and socially. Back to Ian to cover the EU AI Act.
Okay, thanks, Ramya. So obviously we've talked governance and frameworks already, and I'm sure we're all aware that there's a number of regulations and guidelines that we need to be aware of. But I just wanted to touch on this one as it's kind of the most applicable, I think. So you might have heard of it, but it's essentially a set of guidelines proposed by the European Commission. The aim of it is to ensure that, in their words, AI systems are safe, ethical, transparent, and have a strong emphasis on protecting fundamental rights and user safety. So it is a staggered deployments, and also it applies depending on your AI models or the type of AI. So there's 4 levels of risk, ranging from the lowest being minimal risk, so that's largely unregulated, things like spam filters, AI and games. A limited risk above that, so that's where we'd look to require transparency or user to be kind of informed they're interacting with AI. And then you get to the kind of high risk where you have stricter obligations, so assessments kind of for conformity, documentations, and potentially human oversight. And at the top level, you also have unacceptable risks. So that's really prohibited when you're looking at things like social scoring or something that's deliberately manipulative. So depending on what you're building out depends on when it will come into effect for you. For most kind of, you're looking at the kind of general AI models. So there you'd be looking at kind of a IO model that is, I think the definition is along the lines of trained with a large amount of data using self-supervision at scale, which is displays generality and can perform a wide range of distinct tasks. So quite a definition, and as you imagine, that covers quite a wide scope. But because of that, it is certainly one to bear in mind when you're kind of looking to create your AI. So if you'll bear that in mind, that set of guidelines when you're establishing that foundation.
Thanks, Ian. You're always so calming when you talk about the AI governance. I think it's so useful, and I've seen it come to life with clients. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then coming over to you, Simon, back to your experience with BMT that you've been sharing with us. So you got everyone on board, you built the business case and had an approach as to how to leverage AI. So did all the hard work, but then even more hard work ahead. So how did you prepare when deploying AI and gaining that investment from the wider business?
Yeah, gradually and in small steps, but done quite quickly was the overall approach. So if I go back to my sort of my three pillars problem of we had risks, we had people who wanted to be really innovative and get ahead, and then we had a sort of the overarching question of how much do we need to invest the next time to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And I think the whole area is really challenging because of the pace of change. And we found, having started on this sort of journey with some generative AI capabilities in Azure, that every 3 months there was another kind of quite epic change that came ahead of us. And I suppose we were quite fortunate that we sort of set out with a view of, we're going to take small iterative steps. We're going to pilot something. We're going to understand something. We're going to understand whether it's part of our operating model position. Has our approach to security around unstructured data, has it worked sufficiently? Okay, great. Now what does that unlock? Now can we move on to the next step, whilst also balancing that with it not just being a tech project, and going, well, how do we demonstrate value to our business that the investment we're making is right, but more importantly as well as how do you kind of bring the employees on board with you as well. I think quite a lot of AI projects where you're talking particularly around structured data are really good organizationally. You can see good organizational benefit, but actually for individuals, unless they're directly involved in it, it's just something else that's happening away. And I see the end result of the graph or the decision being made, but I don't necessarily, doesn't directly impact me. Whereas with generative AI, for us, it was very much personally affecting people's jobs. And so what we've had to go through is a constant loop of, what's our kind of adoption playbook here? How are we going to communicate that we're doing a pilot? Okay, that pilot's worked. Now it's going to be scaled. How does that change our approach to how we're going to communicate this within the business? Get the leadership buy-in for the next stage of investment, and keep going. And what's I think really good about sort of the Microsoft and Azure stack is that once you've got some of those foundations in place and you've kind of built the platform, you've kind of got the landing zone in place, actually doing lots and lots of then smaller projects that deliver real value in places actually is possible to do in tandem. And actually what we've got now is quite an array of different stakeholders around the business building on top of the platform that we've put in place as an enterprise to now allow a bit of local experimentation, but also then sort of more global scaling. But you find yourself constantly in that cycle of, you're understanding something, you're piloting it, you're scaling it. We haven't quite got to the point yet of actually retiring anything, but actually the first few retiring things are already on the horizon now, because we can see that actually there's a better way of doing something we've been doing for a while. So yeah, really has helped to kind of build on top of that sort of infrastructure that can take away quite a lot of the headache of every single project being unique, which has been a real bonus for kind of getting ahead with what we've been doing.
Yeah, 1000%. I think, the people part of it was really resonating, how you were thinking about the whole organization. And yeah, a lot of times tech projects can kind of happen, without too much disruption until they're going live, or as this iterative approach that you were taking, the small, quick steps meant that you could kind of bring people along the journey, which is really cool. But speaking about people, did you have any resistance internally around that?
Resistance in the form of there were some very technically aware people who were worried about some of the technical risks. So how was security being handled? Where's the data going? If we're using a model, if we're using somebody else's model that we're not training ourselves, where is that hosted? How are we worrying about data residency, data sovereignty as well? Because we work in a lot of our business kind of has those sorts of commercial and security constraints as well. So there was kind of one bracket of resistance, which was technical stuff, which actually, as you work through, this is our secure by design principles, this is what we put in place, this is how we're onshoring this aspect, this is what we're doing to reduce IP leakage, etc. There's that side of life of fear, and actually that was the initial concerns, really, because I think for most people, when you start to do this, people can kind of gravitate to the things they're aware of. Yes, I shouldn't leave my laptop on a train. I shouldn't just stick all my work documents in a Google Docs folder, my personal one somewhere. Kind of people can kind of conceptually get that. Once you overcame that hurdle, there was then the kind of the more gradual people who were just very fearful of what this meant for their jobs and their way of working. And I think in any organization, if you sort of think about, there's a bit of theory and innovation about the diffusion of innovation curve. And if you think about any population of people, there is a percentage that are always going to fight and not want to progress and do a new way of working. And I think my lesson with that has been, you just kind of got to accept that. What you've got to do though is worry about the kind of the majority of the organization. How do you help them overcome their fears, maybe about what this is going to mean for their job, but also to be quite truthful that actually there are some aspects of some things that we do where we can see in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years probably aren't going to be part of our daily working life anymore. Much like my commute to work used to be a fact of life 5 years ago. Now I work from my spare bedroom 19 days a month. It's it's completely different change. So I think you've got to be very honest and open with people that we're doing things, they're going to add value to the business. It will have an impact. Some will be positive and some people will love it. And there will be some people who will resist, and that resistance can take the form of just complaining, not engaging. And often we kind of overcome that with sort of more one-to-one direct calls, or even just acknowledging that sometimes you're just not going to agree that that this is happening, and provide them opportunities to resolve that situation themselves as well. Because ultimately, as a business, we can't please everybody all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the what's in it for me question is one that comes up quite a bit when people are adjusting to different systems, tools, ways of working, as you said. And I saw in our chat in the poll, a lot of the people on this webinar are also leveraging Copilot, where that also comes up, So, seeing a demo, seeing things live, and then kind of mapping it to your own work can be a really helpful way to just get familiar with, the benefits, which then helps with the resistance side of it. But I like the point about being open and honest about this being a journey that, we're kind of collectively on. And I think, you're in such a great spot, given the fact that, as you said, you're already kind of looking at what you're offboarding, like you've launched a bunch of things. So now that you're at this point, what advice would you give, given the fact that you've already kind of gone for it?
I think the first thing is don't wait because you think something better is just around the corner, because something better is just around the corner. Right. But if you don't start, you'll never start. And actually, you learn more by doing. Even if you do something and then realize, I know Microsoft had just released Copilot Studio or something. You go, oh, actually, that thing we've just done, we could have done it this way, or there was an alternative way down the line. I think you can't live with those sorts of fears, because sometimes you might still get 2 or 3 years out of a solution before you're forced to retire it for some other deprecation, kind of end of life kind of issue anyway. But in business, 3 years is quite a long time. I think the other thing is don't underestimate quite how long it's going to take you to go from a successful pilot to a organizational wide scaled application which has got a lot of people using it. If I just take our M365 Copilot journey, like we've gone from nothing to about 30% of the business using it, which is really, really good weekly adoption rates. But 6 months ago, I was looking at it thinking, this isn't really taking off. And then sort of suddenly about 3 or 4 months ago, it sort of really started to take off and things started to work. So you've just got to be very, very consistent with things, and accept the fact that actually if it's not launching right, or it's not giving you the features you want, you've got to consistently look at it and say, well, what do we do? Was it the communications around it? Was it the training? Was it the solution that just isn't quite good enough? And make lots of iterative changes, particularly whilst you're in that scaling phase.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those lessons learned are really helpful for folks. And as you said, if you're waiting for something good to come around the corner, it's coming. But also, if you don't go around the corner, then you'll just be paused at the side of a building, not making progress kind of indefinitely. So, congrats to you and your team for really building something, getting the buy-in, building a vision, and then really taking those iterative steps, as you said, to get yourselves towards that vision. So really just appreciate you sharing that journey.
Thank you.
Amazing. I see that we've had a bit of back and forth with KK, who had a really great question in the chat. I didn't know, Luke, Ramya, we'll just kind of round up on some Q&A before we wrap. If you wanted to just kind of summarize a little bit of your thinking, maybe Luke and then Ramya on, I think, kind of the question around, sure. Like good data governance, and go for it, Luke.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hilary. Yeah, so there was a question in the chat from KK around the sort of, you've already got data governance in place because you may have a well-mature and established data platform before AI obviously sort of came along and was as a focus. So KK's question was around sort of how does data governance adopt to then start to account for the AI element. So from a purely sort of very much a data perspective side of things, a key sort of starting point that we see is that data lineage and traceability. So some of the sort of tool set that Ian was talking about within Purview, that ability to map where your data is coming from and actually who's using it, is key before you start to unleash sort of AI solutions on top of it, right? Are you definitely sure the data that you're passing into your AI solution is the data that you want to be presented back to the end users? And then second upon that as well, in KK's question, there was that the data quality is high, and whilst you might think the data quality is high from an analytical point of view, and nobody's questioning that. It's probably being used by the business to drive insights and decision making. There can be some historical biases in there around the data. So especially typically around the sort of the COVID period that we see as well, that sort of flipped businesses on its head in terms of what data looked like. So it's important to go back and revisit your data footprint as well. Just see if there is any of those biases in there that actually, if we feed this into an AI solution, is that going to completely skew the way in which it interprets it and plays it back to the end users? I don't know if Ramia's still with us. I think she was suffering from some battery issues.
Yeah,
but
I'm with you.
Cool.
That's why
Okay.
I'm off camera, but I can still hear you. So yeah, to add on to that point, Luke, is the historical inequalities as well. And I know different demographic parities coming from, are they having equal outcomes across the groups? Are they positive ratings, the ratio between the outcomes? And also, are they really missing certain groups of most important values around those? Sampling of those biases, is it underrepresentation of certain groups, or even proximities that does not reflect the true outcomes? Those are the kind of few features that we can detect in terms of talking about biases around the data, really.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. And then just one last question. Have we faced a request from the management to use a completely on-prem, offline, secure Gen AI system for enterprise docs or data? And if yes, what was the solution? So hardware, software, LLM, ... Does anyone on the Avengers panel want to take that?
So we typically...
Oh, Ramya, go for it.
Sorry. We typically go for anything to do with AI. We're obviously going first step cloud hosted solutions. But if there are large volumes of data that's on-prem, we kind of port over them to the storage and then apply AI on top. We haven't really, there are lots and lots of connectors within Fabric also available that you can ingest directly into AI solutions, be it ML. ML can be standalone or with an AI Foundry. But yeah, you can plug in lots of data connectors if they're still an on-prem.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then, yeah, for those who maybe have additional questions, want to continue to engage with this team, a couple of really fun opportunities coming up. So one, we're running our Agentathon in person in London on the 16th of September. Still have some spaces available. And this is a follow-up from an Agentathon that we did. It was sweltering, but I think it was in July. That went really, really well. So it's a great way to get a sense of the agent world, of how to map use cases and really find which ones will be effective for your organization quickly. And a bunch of the Transparity folks that are here on this webinar will be live at the event. So you can kind of follow up and maybe ask them some more questions over coffee. So we'd love to see you there. And then on the right, if you're really ready to get started and start to think about this for you as an organization, really the next step would be to have an envisioning workshop. So in those workshops, we really focus in on understanding where you are as an organization, identifying some key use cases and what value they'll be to you, and then coming out with a real map and plan on how to make those real. To Simon's point, we can help you kind of start getting started instead of maybe waiting for something to come around the corner. You can kind of take ownership of the pathway that you're on. So definitely reach out. Happy to set up a follow-on call and just learn more about what you're looking to achieve. But with that, we'd love to just thank you all for your time, your questions. All the poll responses were fantastic. And definitely we're here to support you as you continue, we kind of all collectively continue on this journey. And thanks to the panelists and Simon, you guys really brought it all to life, and Simon for sharing your examples. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it.